most people look at the power bills they have and they think about, gee, how big is that power bill compared to everything in my life? And look at their whole kind of household budget and wallets and think, well, the power bill's, well, it's a couple of $1,000s a year. That's only a few percent. You can add in the petrol and you get a few percent more, and you kind of say, well, that's still the minority of my cost base. So maybe it's not a very big part. But it wasn't always like that. That's the amazing thing. It's the achievement of Western civilization and a total miracle of technology that energy is only a small fraction of our actual input needs. But for most of humanity's civilization, it was most of what we did. We hauled water by hand and cut wood to make fire to keep us warm. Like, we had ourselves that we had to feed our animals to get transport. Energy was all our work when we were poor. And it's the miracle of an extremely rich society that it's become such a small fraction of our total expenditure.
Where we're realizing there's another pollutant that comes out of burning fossil fuels, not just the thick smoke that was obvious, but also carbon dioxide, CO2, which leads to a warm up of the planet. That's absolutely incontrovertible. So let's just get that on the table. But the question is, how big of a problem is it? And what can we do about it? And that's where I think the conversation that we have right now has sort of gone off the tracks. People will tell you this is the end of the world. If you read the UN climate panel reports, it is not.
So it's simply not true to say that 1.5 or 2 degrees of warming above this so-called pre-industrial level, which is a myth anyway. There was no level temperature before industry. It's simply not true to say that that degree of warming is catastrophic. The effect on floods, droughts, storms is minimal. The effect on sea level rise is much lower than expected. They keep talking about accelerating sea level rise. It hasn't happened. It's still 3 millimeters a year. That's a foot per century. Can we cope with a foot of extra water per century? Of course we can. It's extremely easy to see this as a minor problem, not a huge problem. The evidence supports that, the data supports that, the warming has been slower than expected, and yet politically it is expedient and lucrative for some people to go out there and say the opposite.
I've had the same conversations with people who run electricity retailers, for example, and people in industry who know that we're on the wrong path, but all want to sign up for a target like net zero because they feel that their shareholders want it or that the public wants it. And the public may well want it. What people need to do is to tell them the truth, that if we continue on this path, it's going to be very expensive. You will see the price in your electricity bill, and that will just be the beginning of it, because you'll also see the price in your food bill, because high electricity prices will drive the cost of everything up. You'll also see it in our manufacturing as the high costs of energy drives those sorts of things out of businesses, as jobs disappear. And let's not also forget, John, that if we are to stick to a net zero target, there's a very big circle that's been put right around some of our major exports, those of coal and those of liquefied natural gas, and of course iron ore is very heavily intensive when it comes to using diesel. So just about wherever you want to look, Australia will pay a disproportionately high price for this. So look, in the end, I'm with you, John. If we're going to make this transition, then the one thing that we could demand of all of our leaders is simply this: tell the truth. What is the cost going to be?
New Zealand, as you know, have promised to go carbon neutral by 2050. They've asked the New Zealand Institute of Economic Research to estimate how much will this cost. So remember, this is the government asking for an official estimate of how much will this cost. It turns out the average estimate is this will cost 16% of GDP.
Whoa.
16%. This is unheard of. Obviously twice as much as what New Zealand is spending on health. It's a phenomenal cost. So if you look at the actual dollar cost, it's more than what New Zealand spends on everything in the public budget today. That's a lot of money. So if you take this across the entire century, they're of course going to ramp up, and then they're going to stay on carbon neutral from 2050 to the rest of the century. If you look at that cost, using the UN's estimate for median estimate for GDP, the total cost for New Zealand will be in the order of $5 trillion US. So that's $5 trillion US these 5 million people will forego over the century. Then you'll say, but at least they'll do some climate good. Yes, but only just. If you run a climate model with and without New Zealand, the impact, the difference, is that they will cut temperatures by the end of the century by 4/1000ths of a degree by the end of the century. Or to put it differently, basically postpone global warming by about 3 weeks at the end of the century. No, I don't think most people want to spend $5 trillion doing that. And that's, of course, the underlying point, I think, for a lot of this conversation. Not only is it a bad idea, it's a bad deal. It's a poor way to help the world.